So, this is an opportunity for two things. One is to continue our discussions and questions and comments. And before we finish, though, I'd like to introduce you to our new center, our new international center and home in France called Bonneveau, and invite you to come visit us there. But before we do that, I'll show you some pictures. Would anyone like to continue with any comments or any questions? We think of hope very much in terms of getting what we want. And in fact, hope as a virtue is more of a conviction than a gamble. It's more of a certainty, but a certainty without proof, maybe, or a certainty that contains its own proof that things will turn out well. All will be well, and all manner of thing will be well, says Julian of Norwich. And the way she says it and the context in which she says it in her book communicates amazing confidence. She doesn't explain what that means in terms of outcomes and how everything is going to be okay at the end, but she communicates that as a conviction arising from an insight. So we have to distinguish between hope of that kind from hopes. And the way that contemplation restores hope to our life is because it gets rid of all our fantasies and daydreams and desperate hopes for what we think things should be like, or the way we think things should be. So in meditation, we are laying aside all of the imagined scenarios with which our minds could be occupied, and some unconscious ones we call fantasies. When we look at them, we say, that's complete fantasy. You know, how did I come up with that stupid fantasy? But they're there in our unconscious and arising from all sorts of places. So in meditation, we allow these to surface and then to just evaporate. And it's hard, in a way, letting go of these, but it's also disillusioning. The word disillusionment has a positive and a negative sense. To be disillusioned can mean, you know, I've had all my ideals destroyed, or it can mean I have become free from the power and the grip of illusions. But either way, it's difficult to let go of illusions and fantasies and hopes, because we get a lot of consolation from them. But it's a fake consolation in the long run. So we have to empty ourselves out of those, that's the spaciousness, in order to find this pure hope, which is unimaginable in a way, but it is a conviction of the goodness underlying everything and the presence of God in everything. Does that make sense? Paul.
Thank you for being with us the last couple days. Two quick but related questions. Father Martin Laird has written a book, Into the Silent Land. Is that something you're familiar with?
I am, yes.
And then the way he describes meditation and the use of the mantra in that book, is that consistent with the understanding of the experience in the world communion of Christian meditation?
Can you? Yes, I have a question about it. I'm not sure.
Sure.
Can you summarize what he says? Because I remember reading it, and it would be useful for others anyway to hear it.
He talks about the experience of meditation as the metaphor is passing through three doors, and that the longer one experiences meditation, in the very beginning, it's sort of a battle with distractions, but through time and many seasons, he says, the relationship with the mantra and the distraction changes until suddenly the mantra, at a mysterious point, leads one into his metaphor, the silent land.
Yes.
And it's that point that the contemplative life really takes a deeper kind of turn. So,
yes. Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, yes, I think that's true. I don't think it's totally linear. I think that cycle is that those stages are cyclical. But that would be the way we understand and teach the mantra in our community. But at first you say it with a lot of distraction and interruption, and a lot of people give up because they don't succeed. But those who come back to it and with a little help from your friends persevere, you then find that you're sounding the mantra with a little less effort. The distractions may still be there, but they interrupt you less often, and they're more in the back of your mind. So there's a definite, more subtle shift in the way you say the mantra. Then the next stage, we would say, would be listening to the word as you say it. And this listening is now really taking the attention off yourself and off your thoughts, and you're more likely at this stage to have periods where you can say the mantra without any interruptions, maybe for a period of time, or even you come to a place of no thought and a perfectly clear blue sky of consciousness. And then you might say to you, and that can happen at any time, of course, but that, so you then say to yourself, oh, hey, I can do it. Yeah? This is good. And I'm not such a bad meditator after all. And I have no thoughts. But the thought, I have no thoughts, is a thought. So in that stage, that's a certain level of awareness and consciousness, which is good and beneficial, but you're not there yet. So the teaching of this tradition is to keep saying the mantra continuously, but now, of course, you're saying it very differently from day one. You're now saying it much more subtly. You're listening to it. And in God's own time, you may be led into pure prayer, as the desert monks called it. And pure prayer is where it is not your prayer at all. It is your entry, or by grace, by gift, into the prayer of the Spirit. We do not know how to pray, but the Spirit prays in us. Now that is sheer. We can't anticipate that. We can't confect it. We can't pretend that it's there. That is pure gift and grace. But as soon as you become aware, self-consciously aware, that you are no longer saying the word, then you return to the word. But again, you're now saying the word much more gently and much more subtly. So I think I would agree with that, but I don't think it's an easy linear thing. I think we go through cycles, and it's like a spiral. You go over the same ground, but you're going deeper at the same time. And one sign of this taking place is that the mantra becomes more rooted in your being, in your heart, in consciousness. And so quite naturally during the day, when you're waiting for the elevator, or when you're on the bus, or you're sitting waiting for the dentist, the mantra will quite naturally rise in your heart and links, the surface of your daily mind to the depth of the Spirit praying in you. And so that is a great gift. There's no pill yet that has been invented to produce that. So it's, I think a lot of the pharmaceutical industry, psycho drugs would love to be able to produce that, but it can't be done, obviously. So, and this opens up for us the meaning of continuous prayer. That we are carried along by, or we are immersed in this contemplative state, or in this continuous prayer all the time. But it's not through our effort; it's by our receiving the gift of it. I think the question, why isn't the Church pushing it? Well, I think we've made a lot of progress in the last 20 years or so in general acceptance within the Church, among the clergy, among the laity. Tremendous progress in putting it back into the mainstream. And you see, when both our churches, well, really all our churches, I suppose, are pretty heavy on the clerical side. And now, you need a clergy, and they've been around from the beginning of the church. But we should remember what Pope Francis said, the three temptations of the church faces, all our churches face is, first of all, the danger of treating the gospel as if it were an ideology. So sort of turning it into and then having a thought police to control it. Secondly, running the church as if it were a multinational corporation, just a corporation. And thirdly, clericalism. Now, clericalism is like a codependency. You couldn't have clericalism unless you had a laity that accepted it, and a clergy who kind of got some kind of kick out of it as well, although it doesn't work well psychologically or spiritually for either to be in that sort of codependent relationship. But so much of our ecclesiastical structures are based upon that. And we have to shed that. We have to move out of that long period, that long period of Christian history where clericalism has exerted an disproportionate pressure and influence on the way the church lived. And so the cure for clericalism is contemplation. It's also the only cure for fundamentalism. You can't argue with a fundamentalist. And so I think what we're seeing here, for example, this weekend in this church, and as a clergy that does not look to me clerical in a clericalistic way, and a laity, a congregation that is working, living, working, collaborating with different kinds of vocation, different kinds of gifts and talents. And what is making that possible is the spirit of contemplation and the priority given to contemplation within the religious experience of the church, of the community. And that is a subtle thing. It's not just a matter of putting on a program. It's about living it from day to day. And as Father David was saying, you know, the big impact that Archbishop Rowan Williams had on him when he found him praying in the chapel first thing in the morning before anybody else arrived. And it took him, as Father David said, it took him some time to understand the significance of that. And so I think it does take time. It's about witness, example. It's about having churches like this that become beacons of new ways of being the church. And that will prepare us for the further cataclysms that are going to come to the institution. Because all of these church institutions are not doing very well in corporate terms. So we have to, there will probably, I don't know, but there will probably be some serious earthquakes in the institution for which we are not that well prepared and often in denial. Certainly in the Catholic Church, there's complete denial, not complete, but very widespread and deep denial of the demographics and the obvious changes that are coming, because they don't know what to do. And it's like, wasn't there a volcano erupting somewhere recently? I forget where it was. Remember? And they were trying to persuade the people on the slopes of the earthquake of the volcano to leave. And the people said, "No, but we've got our houses there, and we've got all our sheep up there as well." You know? So there's something of that denial and tenacity. So I think what we need are a remnant of the faithful, a remnant or a contemplative minority, a seed. It's only a leaven. It's never going to be the predominant form, probably, of the church, but it needs to be a leaven from which new forms, after the collapse of the old forms, the new forms will develop. So we don't know, but it definitely is. I think we are being prepared for it, and we'll see that there is a contemplative, a subtle, silent, often invisible kind of contemplative network among all the churches, which will survive the earthquake or earthquakes when they come. Well, it's a balance, but I think there's also a need for a connection, because the action that you live in the world, in finding your particular way of serving the needs of others and making your contribution to the better world, that work that you do needs to be grounded in contemplative depth and stillness and energy, because otherwise you either burn out or you get disillusioned and you fail. Your work lacks quality or sustainability because it lacks this connection to being, to depth. It's like some missionaries I met once who were working very much with social justice in Asia, and they would get lots of volunteers, and they would say to the volunteer agencies, "Please don't send us any more just angry young people who want to make the world a better place, because they always end up making things worse for us." You know, and these, the ones I met, were all contemplatives. These were missionaries working on the front line for the well-being of others, for peace and justice, and they made a priority of meditation, and they would teach meditation to the people that they were serving as well. So I don't think there's a real the balance comes through seeing the connection between being and doing. It's the Martha and Mary. And Jesus is challenging and annoying sometimes to people because he says, Mary has chosen the better part, which doesn't mean that contemplatives are better people, but it means that being comes before doing, and the quality of your being will determine the quality of your doing. And if you lose the quality of your being, you end up like Martha, stressed, angry, frustrated. We're doing a clinical trial, controlled trial in Dublin with an emergency department of a big hospital, and 30 or so of 60 or something of the doctors and nurses working there have signed up for this trial, and they're all very eager to meditate. And they're amazing people. These are emergency department people who give of themselves amazingly generously, sometimes too generously, because they don't know, they don't have limits or boundaries, and so they have a very high burnout rate. And they know, and then of course they're not useful anymore. So they know, and burnout doesn't necessarily mean that you are, you end up on the floor screaming and kicking. What it may mean is that you are gradually withdrawing from a personal contact with the people you are serving. It becomes depersonalized, and you're operating on automatic pilot, remotely. And so your way of relating to people becomes colder and more mechanical. That eventually might lead you to break down as well, because it puts tremendous stress on you. So burnout has different functions, as I'm sure you know, but so they are intuitively very attracted to meditation and understand it as a way of avoiding that. And they know that the times they give to meditation are not selfish, that their meditation is actually a gift to the people they're serving.
Could you speak to us about the idea of wisdom in relationship to meditation and contemplation?
Well, I think it's maybe best understood in terms of different kinds of knowing. We have sort of unconscious knowledge where we sort of know something, or even know that something is going to happen without knowing how we know it. And there's intuitive forms of knowing, there's very rational and analytical forms of knowledge and understanding which predominate in our training, and this is very helpful and productive. It enables us to solve lots of problems by breaking things down, but at the same time it's a very limited form of knowledge if that's all that you're relying on. So so wisdom is a way and a form of knowledge, or a way of knowing and perceiving and understanding things that allows you to integrate those other ways of knowing as appropriate to the situation or the person, and to see life or the situation you're in at the moment as a whole, or in context and in proportion. So I think this is, we think, or we hope that the older you get, the wiser you get, because you've seen a lot. And so, a young person will go to their grandparents and say, I've had this terrible relationship, bust up, and I don't think I can live any longer. And after an hour with their grandmother, she'll say, well, yes, you'll probably have a few more of those. And she'll help the child to see that this is, to see it in proportion and to see even the value that it may have for their future development. Or, for example, like a good friend of mine some years ago who was dying of cancer at quite a young age, and when she, before she died, she had found a very deep peace. She moved from panic to peace within less than 2 years. And she said in a conversation that we had, her husband and I had with her, it's online actually, it's called From Panic to Peace, it's a video. She said at one point, the last 19 months have been very horrific in many ways. I've been dealing with the fact I'm going to leave my family who I love and my life, at this young age. And there's been a lot of pain and discomfort and suffering. And then she said, but I would willingly go through all this again for the sake of what I have learned. Now, she could not have said that, and she meant it, without having come into this other way of knowing, which could even see the meaning of great pain and loss, and see it in such a way that you could even, in a sense, be grateful for it. And that's often what people with a certain distance of time can do, can look back on a tragedy in their life and say, in some ways, I'm grateful that this happened because it taught me something I could not have learned any other way. So it's another way of knowing, I think. And meditation, and of course it's an aspect of the contemplative mind, wisdom. You associate in some way with the contemplative mind. That's why we need the contemplative mind in business and politics, in journalism, in psychology, and in teaching, and in medicine, and in everything. We need a contemplative mind, and we need it in religion as well. But we need it in every activity of life. And the reason that meditation develops this way of knowing is because it allows us to suspend or to step aside or be detached for a while from all the conventional other ways of knowing that usually preoccupy us, the analytical and so on. So when we meditate, we are doing something that they called a way of unknowing. It's called the apophatic way of prayer. So it's entering into what looks like unknowing. When you look at it from our usual perspective, it is unknowing. But when you are in it, or as it develops, you realize that it is actually a new, different kind of knowledge. And you don't have to make it happen because it is already part of us. This wisdom, this way of seeing and knowing, is already inherent in us. It is the life of the Spirit in us.